can you call Heba to ask where she is? Oké. We bellen nu Heba om te vragen waar ze is. Ga ik ondertussen de rest proberen.
From Amsterdam, welcome all to the book launch of Forces of Art, Perspectives from a Changing World. This event is brought to you by HIVOS, the Prince Claus Fund, and the European Cultural Foundation. My name is Aldit Hunker. I'm a global freestyle multimedia journalist with 25 years of experience with mainstream media. And for the past 13 years, I've been operating independently, mostly as a moderator of conferences, events, and debates, and as a talk show host. It's my pleasure to guide you through this event that many of you have been looking forward to for quite some time. Now, the book we are launching today is right here. As I said, Forces of Art, Perspectives from a Changing World. It was 2 years in the making, from the conceptualization, through the research and the writing, to the publishing by Valise here in the Netherlands. The book is a journey into and an investigation of the transformative force of art and culture on the lives of people around the world. How can artists and cultural organizations forge more open and inclusive societies? In order to find the answers to that question, we will virtually travel around the world and experience the powers of art and culture in different corners of the globe. We will hear from editors, the advisory committee, and of course, the researchers and the authors of the book. We will learn how to accelerate our imagination, and we will drop in a couple of times to see how our live illustrator, Mena Marleen, captures every highlight of every session that we bring you. So Mena, have you started? We're trying to get some stuff resolved here technically. I'm just trying to tell you, my technical crew, that I don't see anything on this screen, so maybe that's the problem. Just telling you. Do we have Mena on the line? Mena Marleen? Not yet. We'll drop in with Mena later. She'll be live illustrating this event as she has done the workshops that have gone so far, and she does a really good job of that. During the time of the event, she just draws what she hears and sees, and in the end, we have this illustration of the entire event. Now, I'm going to ask you to join in as well. You can drop your comments or your questions in the chat area on Zoom or on Facebook, and we will include as many of those as time will permit. On that note now, just allow me a little view at my tech team. Do we have our first speaker ready? Yes? So let me introduce her. It's time to introduce to you an artist, an educator, and a researcher on the topics of politics, technology, and architecture. She was not involved in the making of the book, but she definitely is an expert on the force of art. and she's famous for using art on a daily basis to allow for change in the world. Why is art so very relevant, especially now? Let's ask Heba Amin.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I want to first thank the organizers, and particularly Ilaria Mancini, and to the Prince Claus Fund, the European Cultural Foundations, HIVOS, and Framer Framed for supporting this very necessary project and for giving me the honor of opening this event. So if we can start with the slides. On October 2nd, 1935, Benito Mussolini broadcasts a speech that declares the tie between Italy and fascism as perfect. He defies the sanctions placed on Italy by the League of Nations and calls on the Italian people to overcome adversity through their character, which has been handed down from a glorious past. That same year, Mussolini initiated a large building complex, the Palazzo della Civiltà Italiana, for the 1942 World Exhibition as a symbol of fascism for the world. It was designed as a nod to the Colosseum, a celebration of a Roman landmark. If you look more closely at the top of the building is an inscription taken from his speech that day on October 2nd, 1935, which states, quote, "A nation of poets, of artists, of heroes, of saints, of thinkers, of scientists, of navigators, of transmigrators." Should we be seeking a revolutionary aesthetic? 20 years ago, Chinese artist Han Bing initiated a social project by walking a cabbage on a leash. The cabbage, as he states, is a quintessentially Chinese symbol of sustenance and comfort for poor Chinese that interrogates social values by ridiculing the state of things. His performance proposes a reconsideration of the general lack of engagement with systems that have perpetuated a cult of consumption. Through his performance, Bing asks people to question the definition of normal practice and to reflect on how much of our daily lives are routines we've blindly absorbed. Inspired by Bing's performance, the Kashmiri cabbage walker uses the cabbage to confront the embedded military presence and post-political conditions of Kashmir. He states that, quote, "I, as a Kashmiri, am willing to recognize walking the cabbage as part of the Kashmiri landscape, but I will never accept the checkposts, the bunkers, the army camps, the torture centers, the barbed wire, the curfews, the arrests, the toxic environment of conflict and war as part of the same," end quote. The artist's flirtations with mechanisms of control and oppression deny the power structures in place, where walking the cabbage becomes a political act that exposes the system. Authority is ridiculed and potentially rendered weak for being humorless about a vegetable being dragged across the street. However, in the age of technological warfare, with drones and remote systems of tracking, the act of walking no longer poses a critique on the constructs of space alone, but also exposes how monitored the body has become in the public sphere, particularly in territories of conflict. This has become even more evident today during the pandemic, with our increased dependency on technological tools of communication and systems of surveillance. Andrew Hewitt argues that the function of the aesthetic sphere has always been to articulate the possibility of another way of life. Arguably, the cultural sphere is one of the few spaces left where criticality can still occur, where spaces of unrepresentation and dataless zones can be explored. Is art, even artistic activism, worth pursuing as a mechanism? Or is it just a tool that uses media to heighten the public's consciousness? Should we be seeking a revolutionary aesthetic? The discourse of aesthetics is political, yet we cannot expect art to definitively modify aesthetic sensibilities or go beyond disturbing the collective consciousness. Rather, it should ensure a re-envisioning of the role of place and identity in shaping cultural autonomy. Cultural activism has been used as a mechanism of resistance for centuries around the world. Anti-colonial Arabic poetry, for example, was one of many ways in which artists subverted their own media to critique oppressive rule. Early 20th century Egyptian poets like Mahmoud Sami al-Barudi, Ahmad Shawqi, and Hafiz Ibrahim utilize anti-colonial rhetoric and criticism embedded in their writing by testing the ignorance of their colonizers. Egyptian playwrights and actors also staged openly political Arabic adaptations of Shakespeare to protest British control of the country during the First World War. These tactics are not unusual as strategies for political dissent. We have been seeing them across the world in the context of colonialism, war, and revolution. It is still questionable, however, how connected the realities of social and political struggle are to aesthetics. Can artists, in fact, enable a revolutionary cultural politics that connects art to social movement? What should we be asking of art at this particular moment in time? Can art be instrumentalized to address some form of social re-engineering? In October 2005, the General Conference of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization held a convention on the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions to declare, quote, cultural diversity as a defining characteristic of humanity, end quote. And further stated that cultural diversity, flourishing within a framework of democracy, tolerance, social justice, and mutual respect between peoples and cultures, is indispensable for peace and security at the local, national, and international levels. It is becoming increasingly clear, however, that protecting such values must not only be inscribed into law, but also ingrained in our collective consciousness as a human right. As we currently find ourselves at risk of losing those foundations of humanity, what strategies can we as practitioners in the art world use to curb a complete disintegration of civil liberties? In their most recent report, freemuse.org gathered statistics from 2019 in regards to how governments fail to respect freedom of artistic expression at a global scale. They list 13 countries of particular concern: Brazil, China, Egypt, France, Indonesia, India, Iran, Lebanon, Nigeria, Russia, Turkey, the United States, and Zimbabwe. They have been considered for the worrying violations and developments documented in each of their countries and analyzed with regards to their human rights responsibilities. According to the report, 9 artists were killed in 8 countries, 71 artists imprisoned in 16 countries, 85 artists detained in 27 countries, 23 artists persecuted in 13 countries. Oftentimes, they are silenced for expressing political views, questioning religious and social norms, and expressing opinions that oppose dominant narratives. Free Muse has documented censorship as the most common violation of artistic freedom. Growing nationalisms have become ever more evident during this year of the pandemic. Can art help us get through this pandemic? I know for many, and I can definitely say for myself, art is the only thing that has gotten me through this so far. The United Nations states that artistic expression is an essential component of human development. They frame art as a human right. When authorities threaten their citizens against asking questions and further utilize censorship to gain a stronghold on how societies function, it is more important than ever to provide a platform that nurtures creative and critical expression. Therein lies the power of artistic and cultural endeavors, which pinpoint the crux of the problem. They quite simply provide a reflective space for critical thinking and experimentation, one that is crucial for those societies which are increasingly being silenced. The voices of Global South artists, in particular, are more crucial than ever in assuring that the imbalance of power does not progress further. Giving Global South artists a platform has become equated with taking an ethical stance on the reparations of history. As such, the roles of art institutions are increasingly important in providing Global South artists with the autonomy to express their own perspectives without the dependence on state funding and the pressures to cater to particular political ideologies. This keeps artists free from self-censorship. If artists don't have the autonomy to express their perspectives without the interference of state expectations, they would most likely be making very different work. Indeed, institutions exploring emancipatory possibilities for artists are institutions committed to scrutinizing and complicating the socio-political forms of contemporary politics. We should, at the very least, be aiming to instill an autonomous power of resistance in art. But we know all too well, in this interconnected system of power hierarchies and neoliberal austerity and privatization, this is not something we should or can depend on. And let's be very clear, the consistent imbalance in power in a globalized world means I'm not just talking about what you might imagine as an authoritative society at the root of the problem, but also so-called democracies who are at the heart of perpetuating and propping up systems of oppression elsewhere. Recent calls to decolonize museums and address the gross imbalance of political power between North and South has further marked the conduct of the contemporary art world. Taking such a stance speaks to the ways in which artists and cultural workers are attempting to claim responsibility and shape the politics of the context we work in. But is it enough? After all, we know very well that the art and cultural sector is not free from complicity. Indeed, art's role should not be to merely educate the public, although there is a strong argument to be made for that, especially now, but rather to break the rules of education and put something entirely different forward. If we don't provoke people to think and question, then we've missed the point. To fully understand the potency of art in its various forms, we need to revise what we understand as an appropriate approach to the question of epistemology, or what is it to produce knowledge through creative practices in an age of apparent post-digital dystopia. How can we make propositions that invent new possibilities for art making and knowledge production? We should be investing time and effort into methodologies of critical thinking, which are necessary for alternative approaches and reconceptualizing future scenarios. Apart from an urgent need to reconsider the ways in which knowledge is produced and applied within institutional contexts, it might serve us well to consider art not as a definitive format for a particular outcome, but rather how it might open up the possibility for transdisciplinary outcomes. What kind of intervention strategies can be used, and what other kinds of spaces beyond the cultural sphere can be activated in order to instigate new discourse around topics that are difficult to engage. This is not new. Artists are actively and constantly asking these questions, and particularly in countries where critical thinking is in fact discouraged. Artists and activists in communities persecuted for critical dissent understand what is at stake. Creativity is one of the last bastions of political expression when oppressors lay claim to all other spaces for themselves. Not only does it offer methods to fragment hegemonial mono-narratives, it offers tools with which to resist and occasionally reclaim them for the people. Some acts of creative protest become symbols, reminders that the outraged voice of the oppressed has the power to make itself heard. In many ways, the vision of self-determination has become increasingly difficult as the convergence of global markets has created a capitalist deadlock with staggering inequalities in place. What does it mean to follow this same trajectory of history? Our inability as artists to deal with the neoliberal frameworks embedded in contemporary art has pigeonholed us into contrived notions of identity and narrow definitions of place. The internationalization of the world, of the art world, and the notion of the global artist has ironically reinforced the same problematic logics of spatial development. This has brought about a poverty of the imagination, as we've been deterred from a real profound investigation of our contemporary moment. To say that 2020 has been a tumultuous year for the art world would be an understatement. More than ever, this year of the global pandemic has shown us that community is very much needed. Has the pandemic crisis changed everything? At the start of the year, many of us were in a state of panic, thinking about what the consequences of the pandemic would be on our livelihood and sustainability of the art ecosystem. Nothing made us feel the impact of globalization more than a worldwide pandemic. The coronavirus laid bare the problematic constructs of neoliberal ideology. Where does art stand in the face of this crisis? In a recent video posted on The Intercept, Naomi Klein argues that, quote, moments of shock are extremely volatile. This is no time to lose our nerve. The future will be determined by whoever is willing to fight harder for the ideas they have lying around, end quote. Yes, well, that sounds completely logical and what we should hope for. But she perhaps did not have in mind the wave of uprisings in 2011, where people fought tooth and nail in the millions, and it got us arguably nowhere. In most cases, it in fact made the situation worse. It takes a global movement, a movement that puts its foot down and says enough is enough. A movement that is driven by those societies enforcing their power dynamics on the marginalized, the powerless, and masking it in notions of free society, so-called democracy, aid, and philanthropy. In other words, a new wave of the civilizing mission mentality. And yes, that includes most of us here. We can only look forward by contextualizing the past, claiming sovereign control over our data and rewriting historical narratives are crucial to directing our future. In order to change entire systems, we must thoroughly know the sequence of events and context that brought them to fruition. In this case, there's a lot of work to be done. And at this moment in time, when the fragility of our contemporary constructs is revealing itself, we must all become active participants in challenging our failing systems. The question is, where can we perform sovereign empowerment without endangering ourselves? And that has sadly become increasingly difficult with the oppressive and often fascist turn politics is taking around the world. Perhaps what I see in art is a space to perform that sovereignty, even if only as an illusion. It remains one of the few spaces to have a discussion, and that is something. Art practice has to be used as an institution to rival form, to open dialogue, to pose unanswered questions, rather than obstructing dialogue through definitive claims. This requires that we locate our imaginations at the edges of possibility, to, let's not say reclaim our own narratives, but to pose something compelling and entirely divergent. Earlier this year, a survey in the Sunday Times asked readers from Singapore what jobs are the most crucial in light of the coronavirus pandemic. They were asked if they were willing to spend more to support certain sectors of society. The number one non-essential job listed by respondents was artist, as something we could do away with. it perhaps reveals more about the narrow imagination of what we deem art to be, and a complete disconnect with just how deeply ingrained it is in our lives. Art allows for nuance, a way of complicating and addressing the world through various perspectives. Society needs its artists and the individuals who are not afraid to express their opinions, who have an acute sensibility towards detail, who touch our emotions, who move us, who inform us, who remind us of our humanity. They are also, in many ways, at the forefront of countering neoliberal dogmas and fascist narratives. Artists are essential to our well-being, and I say this with no hesitation. In an interview with the New York Times, Han Bing encourages people to join his movement of walking cabbages or other appropriate vegetables as a form of protest. A few years ago, in response to his call, I decided to join the ranks of vegetable walkers with a watermelon, a symbol used in parts of the Arab world to describe something as a joke or a sham. This was at the height of the detainment of artists, cultural workers, activists, bloggers, as well as human rights workers, among others, in Egypt at the time. It not only made clear the dangers of having an opinion, especially the wrong opinion, but the entanglements between art and politics and the power of art to pose a threat. And I say this is a valuable resource. At a time when people were arrested for taking photographs or being at the wrong place at the wrong time, or using satire and parody to make sense of our situation, I walked a watermelon on a leash to see if the absurdity of such an action would conjure alarm. It was a silly experiment and probably not worth the risk, but helped me better understand the boundaries of critical expression. Today, we see a new wave of surveillance, censorship, and detainments, especially in Egypt, and are left feeling powerless in our inability to fight entire systems of power that extend far beyond our geographic localities. Perhaps a gesture like walking the watermelon can create a momentary schism in our political realities, or at the very least allude to a much needed spatial imaginary in which criticality can be explored. Perhaps there is something to be gleaned from Mussolini's inscription. Interestingly, when you ask native Italians about the meaning of the term transmigrators or transmigratori, the context is vague. They are often not sure. One translation of the speech translated as colonizers. If you look up the term transmigration, however, it refers to the movement of a soul into another body after death, a reincarnation of sorts. It might serve us well to pay attention to the signs of a rising fascism, to use whatever tools we have at our disposal to subvert these alarming trends and work towards a new community, a new body of poets, of artists, of heroes, of saints, of thinkers, of scientists, of navigators, and especially of transmigrators. Thank you very much.
And thank you so very much, Heba Amin, for your insightful reflection on the necessity of art as a vessel of resistance, emancipation, and autonomy. Thank you so very, very much. I would like to take this opportunity to now formally welcome our viewers on Facebook and to apologize to them for the technical hiccups we had at the beginning of the program. I hope everything is now okay. Do join us online with your comments and your questions on the Facebook page or otherwise on the Zoom chat box if you are there. So as I said in the opening, in a small series of mini launches of the book that we are launching today, we will virtually travel across the globe to see how the forces of art resonate in different parts of the globe. We start with an organization in Indonesia. How do they impact their surroundings? How does their work make theirs a community for all? Let's see what they have to tell us in their video.
Kunci was founded in 1999 at the time of the end of the autocratic Suharto era. It was established with the interest to place studying as one of our primary practices. We study in various ways, and studying takes on a variety of meanings. Started by 2 university students who were active in the student press body, now Kunci's membership consists of 9 people, and our affinity is based on friendship and informality, as well as self-organized and collaborative principles. Initially formed as a cultural studies study group, at present, Kunci's practices emphasize on collectivizing study by way of making space, discussion, library research, publishing, press, and school organizing.
The nature of our spaces is like a spillover that escapes from any form of formal institutions. It's a mix between home and office. It takes different formats and scales depending on people who are involved in activating the space. Our space works through organizing people and providing rooms to study and exchange knowledge. Kitchen and garden have become a space of commons where many organizations and collectives hang out and gather on a daily basis.
When we envisaged the School of Improper Education, we thought about the areas of our priorities, which not only cover our works at Kunci, but also our personal lives. Can we make them balance? We wanted to create a program which did not only articulate our intention to raise critical voices, but also it should be the one which embodies our willingness to study together. At the same time, the program should be able to be the medium where we can question the meaning of our collective. At the school, we are experimenting with local pedagogies and use them as improvised tools to approach our environment. The school is part of our long-term strategy to sustain our ideas and relation with social environment, and our community is defined more by the intention or desire to create a critical space across various independent groups of academics, artistic, and social movement communities.
Thank you, Kunci in Indonesia, for creating this space and for allowing your community in and involving them in your art and your cultural work. I'm going to check in on Mena Marleen now, our live illustrator. Mena, you are there now?
Hi, Aldous.
Hi. Yes,
yes,
you've been busy. Yes, we're seeing what you're doing so far. You've been busy. Take us through it shortly, if you can.
Yes. Sure. So this little corner that you see here is Heba giving her talk. You can see a little cabbage being walked in the street over there. You can see some culture happening in the pandemic, and then in the right corner, there's just some stuff that I just saw in this video that we were shown.
Yes.
That I thought looked good.
And as the rest of this event goes on, you will be adding to this illustration. Don't forget me. Just saying. Just saying.
Never.
Never. Okay. You got your work cut out for you, Mena. Good luck with that. Okay, so we are, yes, thank you. So we are now in the heart of this program. Remember to join in via the chat on Facebook or in the chat box on Zoom, wherever you are watching. And do try to keep your questions and your comments on topic so that we can quickly sift through them and see who we can add to this conversation today. Now, in a short while, I will be talking to people who were involved in making the book, and together they will add depth and substantiation to the topic of the book based on not only the research in the book, but also on their own broader experience. So let me introduce them to you first. We have Jenny Mbaye, one of the researchers and authors of the book. Her work focuses on urban popular music and cultural economies in sub-Saharan Africa, with a specific interest in urban creativity, cultural policy, and governance. Hi, Jenny, just wave to us, please. Then we have Nishant Shah, who is also a researcher and author of the book. His work finds itself at the intersection of body, identity, digital technologies, artistic practice, and activism. Welcome, Nishant. Just wave at us if you will. The third person is Kitty Zelmans. She's an art historian and chair of the advisory committee to the Forces of Art initiative. She's especially interested in the ongoing intercultural processes and the globalization of the artwork. Welcome, Kitty. And last but certainly not least, the editor-in-chief of the book, Karen Cooney. She is also a curator, a writer, and an educator with a vast curriculum in the arts. It's way too much to tell you now. If you are interested in the works of Karen Cooney, just Google her and you'll find her whole story. So once again, welcome all. Before we dive into our conversation, I would like to give the floor to Karen so that she can walk us through the book and we can finally see not only the outside, but the inside of it as well. Karen, be my guest.
Well, thank you very much, Aldis. You know, with the challenges of the current moment, a global pandemic.
Is she muted?
Am I muted? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can't. Ik hoor het niet.
Can you just give me a sense of whether people can hear me? Oh, okay.
Yes, we can now certainly hear you. Sorry about this, Karen. This is a live thing. That's why it's going this way. Can you please start over? I'm sorry about this.
Certainly. It's a very particular moment for me with the challenges of what we're facing, a global pandemic, deep systemic racism, climate change on a planetary scale. I actually didn't think I would find myself here, holding in my hands a book, not even 500 pages long, and asserting that it does contain directives, possibilities, prompts that are actually useful for our times. The fact that we're able to celebrate forces of art, perspectives from a changing world, and to turn to it as a guidepost or an orientation pole is entirely due, I am convinced, to the collaborative nature of everything that went into making it. I think we're all perfectly well aware that the last decade or so has seen an explosion of the field of socially and politically engaged art practices throughout the world. This book, however, does more than document this development. It actually enacts a core characteristic of the forms of art making that we're witnessing: collaboration. To my mind, it is both the critical reflection on collaborative practices and their embodiment in doing so that makes this book so potent for this moment. In two, or well, maybe three sentences, let me describe how it became Forces of Art. It started with a pool of literally hundreds of artworks, art projects that aspire to advance social justice and civil society in their communities. By and large, they were all collaborative endeavors approaching what could be called schools, community gatherings, barter points, radio stations, social hubs and clubs, in short, transgressing disciplines, formats, and durations. All of these projects emerged over the last 10 years in majority world countries, and all have been supported by three organizations: Prince Claus Fund, HIVOS, and the European Cultural Foundation, which are themselves nodes in transnational networks of localized culture makers and producers. Next came the researchers. In response to a call, a loose network of scholars, artists, curators, writers congregated around certain lines of inquiry, coalescing into 15 distinct research teams that each examined, under a particular thematic lens, 3 to 4 projects, and spent the better part of a year researching the impact of these projects on local communities, each one applying distinct and diverse methodologies in doing so. And then lastly, you have a group of editors invited to reshuffle the deck once more, comb through the reports of the research teams, look at the artworks, bundle the findings, and tease out narrative strands and key approaches. And voila, there you have it, Forces of Art, Perspectives from a Changing World, a polyphonic, complex, contradictory, compendium that interlaces different theories, practices, discourses, methodologies to lay out the contours of a shimmering universe of possibilities of being together. But let's see for ourselves. As the ebook unfolds on your screen, let me briefly walk you through the 4 sections of the book. The first one is entitled When Art Opens Spaces of Possibilities, Policies, Tensions and Opportunities. Here, editor Jordi Balta Portales has assembled research reports that specifically look at the complex and fraught intersection between local culture production, national agendas, and transnational funders or NGOs. To us, it was important to place this thematic right at the onset of the book, addressing and certainly not resolving crucial questions of mutual implication of artists and funders in each other's projects and the risk of instrumentalization. The second section, with another group of 4 projects, is entitled Content Sharing and Mistranslation on Global Aspirations and Local Infrastructures. Scale and the possibilities of local discourse and translocal sharing are at the core of this section, which is edited by Zerubiri Moses. Here, one research project or report covers a range of geographies, for instance, projects from Ghana, Tanzania, and Uganda, or another from several of the archipelago of Indonesia, while yet another report focuses on one city only, Dakar. And we'll hear from Jenny Mbey in just a moment about that particular research project. The third section of the book is dedicated to artistic research and its capacity to cross contexts, new methodologies, and digital technologies. Here, editor Noura Khan has gathered 4 contributions that unfold the potential of art as a research methodology, especially as it translates into different platforms. And again, the projects hail from very distinct situations, ranging from Cameroon to Uganda, Kenya, Cambodia, and other countries. Nishant Shan will speak to us in a moment about one of the research projects in this section of the book. Lastly, there is section 4, Histories of the Present on the Political Agency of Art, informed by my own work at the Viralis Center for Art and Politics at the New School in New York. I argue here that collaborative practices present a new formation of political subjectivity, a form of prefigurative politics. 3 research projects or reports in here examine examples from Lima, Johannesburg, Palestine, and Colombia. As you can glean from just seeing the ebook pages pass by with their illustrations and graphs and charts and photos, all of these reports apply different methodologies, ranging from narrative accounts to policy examinations to even commissioning yet new art projects as investigative instruments. After all these reports, the book closes at the end. We return to the art itself in a chapter entitled Mapping Without Borders, an account of all the art projects that were examined in the previous pages, where the projects have been invited to, in a way, self-represent and are featured with photographs and documentation and their own statements. In closing, let me just add a word about the book design. Structurally, every paper book, at least, is a collection of distinct elements, the so-called signatures, a gathering of discrete packages of 16 pages of paper that then get glued together to make up a book. Strikingly, like each section in Forces of Art that offers the opportunity for a readjustment, a recalibration of our registry, the designer, Lu Yang, in her design offers an image of the vast sky above very precise geographic location for each new signature. And each geographic location is the site of one of the projects. In doing so, she's combining, again, like we do in the book, very specific localities with a collective view or perspective, in this case, the sky. To me, that's a stunning way to enact the book's polyphony, to acknowledge individual specific positions, but to also arrive at them collaboratively, collectively, in resonance with one another and in response to each other. This, to me, is the political project of Forces of Art. In the assembly of voices and collaborative practices, it represents a form of resistance to hegemonic forces of hypercapitalism and neoliberalism, which are very much the subtext throughout the book, as they are in art practices throughout the world, as Heba Amin presented so beautifully. All of this is an ongoing process. It's a process of contradictions, incongruencies, discomfort even, that can't be resolved, can't always be accommodated, but can be productively harnessed. In closing, let me just very briefly offer my sincere thanks to the Prince Claus Fund, HIVOS and the European Cultural Foundation to the invitation to edit this book, but also much more significantly to launching this incredibly important initiative. I'd like to also thank Ilaria Manzini, the research coordinator of the book and really the primary companion for me. In the US, we are marking today Thanksgiving, or some of us, and it is one of the reasons that the co-editors of the book could not join us, or at least not those that are based in the US. I'd like to thank them, though, very warmly, Jordi, Balta, Porteles, Sarah Biri Moses, and Nora Khan. And last, my admiration really to Wallis publishers, Pia Pohl and Astrid Forstermans, for putting the book into the world. And now I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Karen. And let me hold it up once again. This is a book launch after all. It is called Forces of Art, Perspectives from a Changing World, as Karen so aptly just said, published by Wallis here in Amsterdam. So let me continue with the other panelists now. I will now ask the remaining three panelists for a short 1 or 2 sentence preliminary reaction to the book. And I'd like to start with Kitty. Kitty Zijlmans, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Hold on, please, Kitty. We have some problem with the audio today. Is it on her side? No?
Hopefully not.
Tell me what to say, Roel, because I can't guess. Okay, Kitty, can you lower your volume on your computer, please? That's the problem. And try again. Let's see if it works. Okay.
But can you then hear me?
Definitely.
Good. It's a fabulous day today. After a 3 years period in which I was involved as chair of the advisory board, and I have been through the process of all the negotiations and hopefully also worked as a soundboard. I'm so very happy, but also incredibly proud that the book is now here, because when I first saw or heard the idea for the book, it was so complex and but so large, and now it is put in a book, and the book has a scope of its own far beyond anything that I could have imagined previously. I now see that you have also my image. Maybe I should leave that for later, because my first response is incredibly proud that this has is going to be a successful event,
Kitty.
and
Kitty,
the book is there.
It is there. Thank you so very much. And I'm moving on to Nishant Shah now. I did ask for 1 sentence, so please let's have that from you, Nishant. Thank you.
Thank you. It's of course really strange to talk about the whole book because we haven't yet seen the book either. This is the first time we're looking at it, but I think from the whole process, there's one thing that's the most striking to me. Oftentimes, the force of art is thought of as reconciliatory, as synthetic, as something that's making transitions possible. But I think throughout the book, you see something different. That the role of art is
Nishant, 1 sentence, because we cannot preach to that. We don't have time for the preach. 1 sentence. Are you happy with the book? Do you think it contributes to the world?
I am happy with the book and it contributes to the world.
Thank you, Nishant. I get to talk to you a bit more in a moment. Jenny, your one sentence reaction to the arrival of the book.
Hi, thank you very much. In one sentence, I'd like to say that this book is very telling in terms of the innovative knowledge production that it sets. And I'm very happy and proud to have been collaborating with it with my colleague. And what is the most important thing about it is that it is about storytelling of incredible experiences that we witness of art organizations throughout the world. So well done, thank you. And big up also to my co-author, Miranda Yusufidis.
Yes, big up to all of them. Thank you, Jenny. So let's try to move a little deeper into the conversation now, starting with you, Nishant. For you personally, what would you say is the transformative force of art?
It's a really interesting question, because one of the things, as I was just saying, is that oftentimes art is invited to be the mediator, to be the manager of transitions, to be something that synthesizes. And I think what we experienced throughout the book project was to recognize that, in fact, the role of art is something different. It's to delineate, to dismantle, to take apart the truths that are taken as given, and in this show us the difference, and perhaps make the possibility for speaking up, calling out and resist that Heba, I thought, brought out so beautifully in her talk today.
Mm-hmm. Karen, do you think that we can measure the impact of art?
Sorry. Yes, I think we can measure it in the sense that we can use art to create meaning, and that is the way to evaluate the impact of an art practice, an art project, to see how has it affected, how is it changing, how is it inspiring new understandings of our condition and our life in one specific locale.
Mm-hmm. And Kitty, in this time of pandemic, what would you call the force of art at this particular moment in history?
I think it's especially at this moment very important to understand the importance of art, because it's really something that I think keeps us related to the world and keeps us sane in a certain way, because all the time it relates us to the world around us and gives us different views, different vistas, where there is such a bleak situation at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Does it comfort you as well in some way?
An aspect of it is comfort, but it's also, again, what we discussed earlier, opening up spaces where things can be really experienced in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Nishant, one of the spaces that have been opened by this pandemic is the digital world. I mean, it was there, but now the whole world knows it and the whole world uses it. So how do you see the role of the ongoing digital transformation in the future of art?
So I speak both on the behalf of my co-author Maya, who has been incredibly helpful in kind of building this framework for the book as well. I think I'm going to say, let's not call them digital transformations. Let's continue to call them human transformations of cultural practice, and that the digital is a driver within that. Because the emphasis on the digital transformation necessarily makes the digital as the center point, where we keep on talking about conditions of storage, probability, and fact, which is not necessarily the ways in which we measure our arts. So if we think about the future of digital transformation of the cultural practice, we would like to think about it as the human transformation of cultural practices with digital as a reference point, so that we do not let go of the fact that we measure ourselves in intensity rather than scale.
So you're talking, it's about the creative process, and it's just the means that are digital. Is that what you're saying?
No, the digital is central and it reshapes the world in different ways, but the indicators that we have do not have to be about the digital. They still can be human indicators to deal with the technological developments that are happening around the world.
Thank you for that nuance. That is quite important. Jenny, what's your take on this?
Well, my take would be that technology, whether it's digital or analogic, has always been part of the development of cultural practices and creative practices. So as much as today the digital has become this prominent tool in our practices, it is also something that needs to be remembered as a tool, as a medium. And the question of how it is used, where it is used, and to which purpose and for which audience and through which producers is what remains key. So I would concur with my colleague here of the importance of the human dimension.
If I may add a personal note, I'm quite a creative person myself, except my hands don't do what my head and heart tell me. And since computers, I've been able to be an artist because the computer does what my head and heart tell me. Could you comment on that part of it? It's as if being an artist has only started for me since the digital age.
Has it?
For me, yes.
Okay, so well then I'm not sure what to say.
No.
Because I do believe that an artist, whatever the technological environment they found them in, are creating whichever means. And then, yeah, they can use some type of tools and technologies to sublime their creation. But yeah, I'm not sure I'm equipped to comment on your personal experience of artistic emancipation here.
Okay, well, I love the way you call it, by the way. I was saying earlier, you are one of the researchers of the book. What would you say is the future of the sector at large? I mean, I know it's a big question, but let's just try to take it step by step.
I don't know what the future holds, and I'm not an adept of prescriptive approaches. However, we can decipher what the reality is currently, and in terms of art organization, we could see, like from the previous participants and intervention throughout this book launch already, like the importance of creating alternative art institutions, independent institutions that are bringing new narrative, that are creating spaces for people to interact, to come together, and to imagine a new future, to dream together. And so we know that these spaces are key for a reinvention of citizenship, for a reinvention of our territories, and for a reinvention of what art is and can do for our societies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You haven't finished yet.
So that's one aspect, the importance of having independent alternatives thriving, and they are there. And the other aspect has to do with how they work and the importance of networking and having like this kind of peer support that exists between these organizations. And I think the questions, if any, regarding the future is how this can be fostered in a way that allows for those other narratives to thrive under their conditions.
Exactly. Thank you, Jenny. Karen, maybe you would like to respond?
Yes. I thought your prompt was really quite interesting, looking at or positioning yourself as an artist the moment you use a different media, you're invited to use different media. I think it's really important to acknowledge the materiality of the tools that we have at our disposition. So when you become a online media artist, digital artist, now the entire technology, where it comes from, where it stems from, who is behind it, what kind of capital force it represents, will become part of your artwork. And this leads me to think a little bit about the notion of space or place that also Katie spoke about, and of course now Jenny. I find it incredibly interesting to not just look at the collapse of linear time that we experience in this Zoom space or in these digital spaces, where all of a sudden we're together at one moment, although we are, incredibly far apart. I'm in the morning, you are all in the afternoon, but we are also composed and bringing to these conversations the material in which we are engaged with. So whether that's my keyboard at the moment, or whether it's the history of this land that I am, happen to sit on, or whether it's, as Lou said in the design, if it's the sky above us, activating those various components as part of this place, I think is where I see like Jenny, not the future, but an enormous potential to reposition ourselves and become more assertive and more productively engaged with communities elsewhere.
Wonderful, wonderfully said. Thank you, thank you. Kitty, maybe your thoughts on this subject.
I would like to underscore what Karin was saying. I was thinking that on the one hand, I'm incredibly grateful that we have all these digital devices and connections, and it will change in the near future, also collaborations, because indeed we have seen now possibilities that we never used so in depth before. On the other hand, if ever there was a moment how I understood the importance of materiality, the physicality of the artwork, but also of people nearby, is precisely at this moment. What I notice is that even if you get a virtual tour through a museum or an exhibition, it is absolutely vital to be there and to encounter the artworks and to encounter them in their physicality. So they're both as real as I'm sitting here now, the digital and let's say the real. But I think they strengthen each other at the moment. I think that's something that we have seen more than ever before at the moment.
Interesting insights. Thank you. So Karen, let me end this segment with you, because now that the book is here, what do you think or hope could be its effect on the world? I am asking big questions, I know.
Yes, you are. One sentence. I think what it holds is the potential of solidarity with other beings, people, of course, other cultures, other ways of being in this world, but also non-human beings, non-human actors. And, whether that's the environment or it's a plant or it's a technology, the cables underneath the Atlantic that connect the two of us at the moment, that I think is where I see a real change to what at least I, as a representative of Western culture, experienced or knew about before. So the possibilities of real solidarity or collaboration, as I tried to say at the beginning of this section.
We can only hope. I'd like to know the other panelists' view on this. Nishant, what do you think this book can be in the world?
I think one of the biggest insights it's going to give us is to recognize that the future is a scarce commodity. That
the
to ask
future
the
is
question,
a scarce commodity?
Yes, to ask the question of future is to already occupy an enormous amount of privilege, because there are communities and people who cannot see their role and survival into the future. And that the force of art is going to be able to build the context, address the unevenness, and make the space where the future becomes a distributed and a collective effort in many ways. And I think the book really embodies that in different ways.
I think you lit a light bulb for many of us by saying that. So thank you very much, Nishant. Jenny, your view on the impact of this book, the possible impact of the book?
Well, I guess it will render, as I said before, because it's essentially about storytelling, but storytelling from a very engaged, committed, and political position, research position, action-oriented, and people-centered. The hope is that these stories will recognize policy debates and academic debates. Times are lagging behind what's currently happening on the ground. And at least from my experience, I've witnessed how people inside those art institutions, this art organization, are already far ahead of thinking and producing, like they are current powerhouse of knowledge production that ought to reconnect with so-called conventional institutions of knowledge. So,
valid,
yeah.
Yes. Thank you. And Kitty, last but not least.
It's definitely going to be a reference book in many respects. One is the incredible world of creativity that is out there and all its forms and all the collaborative projects that are there. So really to learn, and maybe it prompts new initiatives. And the other one, very important, I think, is that for other funding organizations, this is a prime example that evaluation needs to be qualitative and not quantitative.
Thank you, thank you. Those were my questions, but the viewers have made themselves heard as well in the chat box on Zoom or in the comments on Facebook. And let me run a couple of their questions and comments by you. First of all, is the narrative of art affecting societies not just another form of pressure onto artists and cultural organizations to do good instead of being and doing? Who feels compelled to answer this question?
I'm happy to give it a try.
Please do, Jenny.
Give it a go. So I think that this question is very important because he raised the issue of having a space for experimentation, like kind of laboratory to try out things. And this is something that needs also to be taken into consideration, that there's not necessarily quantitative, measurable outputs when you create those spaces, and you need to keep the mind open and curious enough to whatever will come up, because spaces of experimentations are key. And at least some of the organizations that have had the chance to work with are working in creating those spaces of coming together, and comes what comes.
Yes. Another question that's almost the same, but not quite, is what insights can be gained on focusing on artistic processes rather than on results? Like I said, it's almost in the same vein, but not quite. So Jenny, maybe you could elaborate on this part of the question.
I guess, and that's maybe my cultural policy hat that I will put on here, is that it's important to understand that as much as we think value in variegated ways, in different ways, it's important to think of measurements in a diversity of ways as well, in a multiplicity of ways. And I think that's something that Cooney was mentioning in terms of showing an example of how qualitative results matter as much as quantitative, measurable, very efficient and effective type of approach.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Kitty, what would be your view on this?
I would beware of seeing art too much as an instrument to something else. It is foremost itself first, and that can trigger and prompt so many responses that I do not think artists create art or work together to do good. It is because they want to manifest themselves and put something in the world that gives maybe another perspective and open up spaces that were not there before. So that would be my first answer to this.
Thanks, thank you. Karen, here's another question that maybe you can grapple with. The case studies in this book are incredibly diverse in terms of geography and socio-political context, thematic and disciplinary focus, etc. Why is it beneficial to look at them collectively in this way?
For many of the reasons that the other panelists just mentioned, it allows us to be critical and self-critical if we see and experience and examine one project, but are aware that a completely different approach is being applied in a different context by someone else with other but equally successful outcomes. So it allows us to be critical. It allows us to make a choice, to envision and imagine and project us into different contexts, not unlike what Shannon said so beautifully about the privilege of imagining and aspiring for a future. The book allows us to travel through many, many different scenarios and choose one that is correct for us, holds true at that one moment of the reading of that project. And it may change, the next page, with the next page, with the next hour.
Yeah, that makes it fascinating, I suppose. Nishant, here's a question for you, I think. How can artists and art institutions balance the importance of strong global and local connections in a hyper-connected, globalized world? Has the role of strong local ties changed?
Oh, that's such a great question. Thank you, whoever brought it together.
Whoever it was, yes.
Yes, thank you. We can't see who you are. But I think there is something at stake over here. And it also perhaps connects to the earlier question. If we continue to say that the space for experimentation and failure has to be separated and outside of society, then it means that when we fail alone. And I think it's time that we started thinking about failing together. I think the reason why we need to perhaps go back to the question of the local ties and the communities within which we are located, the positionality and the specificity of our address has to do with the fact that art, like a feminist practice, is something which is not just about stewardship, but it's about holding, right? You need to hold something together. That's why it needs to be physical. That's why it needs to be tangible. But that's also because you are holding not just the work of art, but the process, the people, the ambitions, and its histories all together in one go. And in that case, the hyperconnectivity has to be perhaps rethought because hyperconnectivity is often a condition of scale, and maybe we need to transform it and make it into a condition of intensity. Because the hyper doesn't necessarily just have to be millions. Sometimes it can be 10, but it can go much deeper and it can be a reflective, meditative, and a speculative space. So that's what I would like to kind of push for.
What a philosophical view on matters, Nishant. I'm quite impressed, to be honest. What did you mean when you say we need to learn how to fail together? I think that's quite interesting, but what do you mean by that?
I think particularly in the face of the pandemic right now, there is so much precariousness that the arts and culture institutions and organizations are facing. I work with an art university in the Netherlands right now, and we are realizing that the precariousness is experienced the most if we isolate ourselves from all the other social dimensions of health, of well-being, of governance, and of security, for example. And we want to make sure that, of course, we have an autonomous stand and we stand for ourselves in terms of what artistic practices are. But our work is supported by and held together by multiple communities. And the risk of negative consequences of failing is lesser if there are people who stand with us and hold us when we fall. And then our commitment would be that when others fall, we will come and be the safety net and we will stand for you as well.
And what will that bring the world in the end, do you think, if we start thinking along those lines?
For me, it's very, very simple. It's the basic fundament of caremaking. We talk a lot about passions, we talk a lot about love, we talk a lot about emotions, but maybe we need to bring into the equation the recognition that care is what makes the world go around.
Care makes the world go around, yes. Do the others agree? Jenny, your reaction to what Nishant just told us?
I can only concur with that. And I think I remember attending an academy by Raw Material Academy that was entitled one of the organization I work with in Dakar, and the academy was entitled Cura, and reminding us how when we think of curatorial practices, we're thinking of the Latin root of caring, and so it's before anything caring for a space, caring for a community, caring for territory, caring for people and the experience within a given space.
Yes. I wonder, you've been, all of you, you've been involved in the making of this book. Let me show it just one more time for the people who missed the opening. This is the book, Forces of Art, Perspectives from a Changing World. So you were involved in the birth of this book for, what is it, 2 years now? And now it's here. So what's next for you, Jenny? I mean, I know your work will go on, but there's a hole in your life now, I'm sure.
I feel I'm disappointing you today. But I don't proceed with scarcity, but more with addition, and so and inspiration. So this journey has certainly inspired me, in terms of what the relationship between funders and art institution can look like when they further develop, when they go. They take the relationship to another stage, and I was very happy to be part of that journey. And I look forward to see more of this kind of initiatives.
Yes, yeah. I can imagine that. And I presume you enjoyed the process.
I enjoyed very much the process. As I said, it was it gave also a lot of freedom as a researcher to experiment with something that we are interested in, to work with organization that we admire. I'm passionate about the work that some of the art organization I work with are doing, and it was a privilege to be able to share their story and to sublime their work in this way.
Well, we're so happy you took the time and the effort and all the blood, sweat, and tears that must have gone into it. Thank you so far, Jenny. Nishant, same question to you. Now that the book is here, what's on your mind next?
I think for Maya and I, there was a lot of learning in the book. And what is in the book is only a small part of everything that we did in the 2 years. I think the next step for us is going to be really to understand how do you deal with and embrace the unevenness of the different kinds of organizations that we were engaging with. That they do so much work at defending, championing, protecting, and holding together the communities that they work with. In some cases, women, disenfranchised communities, indigenous rights people who are working in authoritarian spaces. And I think I'm looking forward to reading what the rest of the contributions are, but also continuing, definitely thinking about the role that art has to play in becoming this thing that holds us together and brings care about it. And there's much lessons to be learned for us.
So does that mean that the research and the writing that you've been doing for this book will live on and create other things? Is that what you're saying?
For me, that's also part of being a seasoned academic, right? Like, work never stops. This is a milestone, but the journey is very long, and I hope that it continues, and it continues in conversation with the other contributors.
I hope for that too. Thank you, Nishant. Kitty, how about you? Now that the book is here.
Yeah. For me, it's actually a start. It's not the end. It's a start of a whole new phase, and that is that the book is going to be researched, read, inscribed into discourses, into the fabric of the art world, but also academia. So it's going to be a source of whole new academic and other kinds of work and reflection. So it's a new start.
Great. A new start is always a wonderful thing to have it at your fingertips, isn't it? Thank you, Kitty. And Karen, as the editor-in-chief, last word for you. What comes next for you now that this monster task is finished?
Like everyone else, it's really just a point or a marker in a very long journey. What I learned was the necessity to articulate protocols and to be very explicit about how we facilitate these encounters, whether that's on the book page or in our daily lives, in our small local communities, or in these international collaborations that are hold great promise and are incredibly complicated and fraught. So I will continue this search for translation, for understanding, for being able to relate to people, groups, artists, communities very far away, and trying to do so for, certainly for my own enlightenment, but primarily also as a teacher and as a very humble learner, trying to advance the question of how we can not just learn about these projects, but start to implement them in our own communities. And I feel that the notion of protocols, of explicitly setting some ground rules, is what worked for the book. And I have great hope that we can apply some of them to life in our professional lives.
Well, we join you in hoping that. Thank you so very much for your work, Karen. And thank you all panelists for those 2 years of hard work and for the final result. Okay, here it is, the book. So thank you so very much, Karen Cooney and Kitty Zelmans, Nishant Shah and Jenny Mbe. Thank you for talking to me today, and good luck with what comes next, all right? So let's see, where are we in a couple of moments, I wanted to tell you, or all of us, we will be joined by, from Nigeria, live from Nigeria, by Pierre-Christophe Gam. He is a polymath artist who makes really stunningly beautiful and colorful works of art. He will lead us through a virtual meditation to shine a new light on the importance of art. But before we get to Pierre-Christophe, and I know we are looking forward to it, but it has to wait because we will now embark on the second leg of our virtual world tour. We land in the huge city of Douala in Cameroon, where Douala have their headquarters.
Hello people and welcome. I'm Yves Makongo. I'm a curator and the project manager of Douala. Douala is a contemporary art center focused on visual art in Douala, Cameroon. The head office of the Douala Association is located in the heart of the administrative center of the city of Douala in Cameroon. It is equipped with a garden of permanent sculptures, a room dedicated to temporary exhibition and a multimedia documentation center. It is therefore a place of social mixing and intergenerational dialogue. This place is open to all types of public and hosts free discussion led by artists on art and various social topics. In the White Cube, about 7 to 9 exhibitions are shown each year. This reveals a diversity of proposals made by local and international contemporary creators. We have a specialized library which today counts 6,000 to 7,000 books. It's specialized in the history of the city, art, and other related fields. It is mainly made up of personal endowment and donation from various partners. The need for a library was felt from the opening of Douala exhibition space in 1995 in a context where there was no art school. The library has been an indispensable tool for accompanying the Douala and Cameroonian artistic scene in general. The library was the resource database for a program of discussion and presentation on artistic issues. Today, there are a number of art training institutes and the demand for the library is growing. Students, artists, researchers, and the curious are frequent visitors to our library. The presence of Force of Art researchers allows us to realize what a gold mine we have and above all, the motivation to capitalize on our project.
Hello everyone, my name is Pierre. I'm a polymath artist and a storyteller. I'm actually in Kenya at the moment, in Diani, along the coast. My lies at the intersection of community building, storytelling, and future thinking. 2020 has been an interesting year, to say the least. I was very much looking forward to meeting all of you in Amsterdam to reflect on the key findings of the book, but once again, COVID-19 had other plans. The emergence of the pandemic on the global stage has tipped our society into a level of instability that would have been impossible to imagine just a year ago. From the consecutive lockdowns to the gloomy prognostic on the impact of the pandemic on the economy and the lack of social interaction, 2020, as one of my friends recently feels like a bad episode of Dark Mirror, the famous sci-fi TV show on Netflix. Each and every one have been forced to realize to this impalpable and invisible threat, whilst having to daily with an onslaught of bad news and conspiracy theories fed to us via social media. I think the most challenging aspect of the pandemic and its aftermath is a growing sense of control of our lives. It's of a world we feel as if it is falling apart. Personal conviction, though, is that in spite of the current chaos, true reality lies ahead. And I want the opportunity to invite you to step back and consider for a moment reality from a different perspective. Forces of Art explores a very interesting topic, the idea of art for change and social transformation. The book studies various iterations of that formula as performed across the world. Art as a for the creation of new modalities within the and society at large. Throughout placing and its current status as a commodity, art was experienced as a medium for communities to transcend the physical and connect with the divine. Art was understood as the source of energy that fuels and sparks transformation within the engine that is our mind, providing a gateway or launch pad towards our imagination and its potential of infinite possibilities. I have written a short story which purports to articulate a new definition as to the true nature of reality and the place that our imagination occupies within that equation. Its title is Reality is a Moving Sea, whose waves follow the contour of our imagination. In a small village, nested along the coast of Kenya, lived an old fisherman. Folks in the village believed that he had found the secret of eternal life, as it was speculated that he was born at the time of the death of the last emperor of Mombasa, nearly 170 years ago. The legend was that one morning, on one of his daily fishing trips, his boat, surprised by a violent storm, wandered lost at sea. Whilst in the middle of the ocean, he met and fell in love with a Mamiwata, an ancient spirit of the water, who shared with him all of her knowledge, from the science of the stars in the sky to the secrets buried deep under the sea. When he finally returned, 20 long years passed. People in the village were puzzled as to how he had been able to survive for so long without food nor drinking water. They were especially confused by the fact that his appearance had barely changed since the time he left. He still looked like a young man. He never explained how he survived, and his only answer, when questioned on the subject, was that the waves had brought him back home. Since his return, the folks in the village started looking up to him, seeking his guidance and wisdom for matters of the past, present, and future. One evening, as the old fisherman was sitting by a bonfire, a man approached him. He was anxious, as he was about to embark on a long journey, far away from his native land. His father had recently passed away, and he had been forced to stop his education and pause on his dream of one day becoming in order to support his mother and his younger siblings. He had managed to get a 2-year contract to work as a seaman on a large ship. He knew that the job would be hard, but the money was paid up front, and it was enough to sustain his family comfortably during his absence. His departure was scheduled for the next morning, but he was scared. In spite of his financial difficulty, here he had a home and a family who loved him. He did not know what to find on the other. The old fisherman listened as the man poured his heart, sharing his fear about the future. He wanted to know what was the meaning of life. Why were some men destined to lives of pain, and some whilst others lived lives filled with joy and abundance? A punishment for some and a blessing for others? After silence, only disturbed by the crackling of the fire and the sound of the wave surfacing the shore, the old fisherman replied, "Reality is a moving sea, whose waves follow the contours of your imagination. You see, my son, reality is a co-creation. If you expect pain and suffering, then this is what you will find on the other side. But if you welcome love and abundance in your heart, then this is what the universe will provide to you. Past challenges and difficulties in our lives condition us to see the world as a dangerous and hostile place, positioning the fear of death as a central force shaping reality. From that lens, we as human beings are left with no meaningful agency over our lives, and all we can do is to protect ourselves in anticipation of more or less imminent dangers. Life becomes a series of compromises, rationalized as pragmatic decisions, each in a sense motivated by fear. This, my son, is the scarcity mindset. Once we accept to live and experience life from a place of fear, our eyes, our ears, and our heart shut down. Similar to possession, our spirit goes into hibernation, whilst our mind is taken over by an external force. We can still hear and feel at times our inner voice in the distance telling us that something is wrong, but we either reject it or feel too powerless to act accordingly. The secret reality is that everything is just a dream, And it is only when dreams are sent to the infinite soil of our imagination that they can manifest into our world. What we believe becomes reality. When we embrace a vision of paradise versus one of hell, it manifests to become a reality. You must learn to dream bigger and bolder dreams. To dream not from a place of fear, scarcity, but from a place of love, abundance. When you simply react to external events, you will increase your power. It is your responsibility to dream and reflect inward about your fundamental needs and desire, about the kind of reality that will ultimately make you feel good, complete, and wholesome. Feel these things within yourself as if already fulfilled, and then move out into the world to manifest them into your life, with the absolute trust in the fact that the universe will move accordingly to meet you halfway. Journey with no fear, my son. Allow life to move freely through you, and you will experience the most beautiful adventure available to men. The young man looked at the old fisherman with tears in his eyes, as he knew that at this very moment, a lot had been removed from his mind. He stood up, thanked him, and went about to face his destiny with a new gained confidence in the fact tomorrow would be just fine. So, in the spirit of the message of the old fisherman, I would like each of you gathered here to ask yourself the following question. Vision was not clothed by fear and the external noise of events outside of my direct control. In what kind of society would I like to live in? Imagine that world and design it into your mind. Filled in abundance with all that is good to you, with your love and joy, and with the fundamental understanding that the world is you. You are the universe. Therefore, you must be the change that you want to see happening in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pierre Christophe, from Kenya, not from Nigeria, as I said. But you're there only temporarily, I believe? In
Yes.
Kenya? Yes. Maybe you should have stayed
Yes,
at home
I-
where the internet connection is better.
I came to avoid the lockdown situation in Europe.
I understand. We'll be hearing from you again later when you will close up your session. Thank you for now, Pierre Christophe. There's so much happening in the program. My head is spinning, I'm telling you. It's time now for a conversation between the editors of the book, and the editor-in-chief, Karen Cooney, who we saw earlier in the panel, will lead this segment and explain her objectives and her methods. Have a look.
My name is Karen Cooney. I'm the editor-in-chief of Forces of Art, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this little intermezzo or interlude. Forces of Art is evidence of a vibrant network of artists, curators, writers, scholars, and funders who support the forces or forcefulness of art and help ensure that the amazing projects depicted in the book find a generative, critical, and receptive context in the book's pages, but also on the ground where they unfold in very distinct contexts. In the next few minutes, we invite you to join us as we ask ourselves questions about the premise and the outcome of the book. The goal is to give you a sense of the network of editors themselves, how we connect to one another, how one idea emerges from the previous one, leads to a new concept that itself prompts another investigation. Our exchange is modeled on the surrealist game of cadaveric ski, where each new addition to a collective drawing builds on the previous one. Each of us will ask one member of the editorial team a question that we've been wanting to ask for a long time. That person will provide a brief answer before turning to the next person with their own question. We'll do 2 rounds of this, not knowing where we'll end up, except to point to the book as the true holder of knowledge and valuable insights, and to you, our readers, as the intended receiver of it. Nora, collectively, these essays capture a wide range of different methodologies and different languages. I'd like to ask you about the latter. What is the potential of communication, of actual understanding, of teaching and learning when our languages, our vocabularies, our discourses and reference points vary so greatly?
So the process of editing these texts across continents and theoretical territories really asks for a lot of flexibility. I found an analog between editing and the undertaking of artistic research. The power of an artistic research methodology is to really keep a rigorous but open-ended set of strategies for inquiry and analysis across subjects, and the same goes for editing. Editing becomes a practice of holding space for the narrative of artistic practice, a story about a search for an unknown while keeping history and context and framing in sight. So the text becomes a kind of unknown territory where insights are formed in process and sharpened in dialogue. And in this unknown, the editor functions as more of a shepherd for the process. You work with an author to try and mine material and shape narrative while remaining within the context of their established research process. So as in artistic research, I evolve with the text insights, I revise my values around writing. I have to really be careful not to impose frames or alter the researcher's methods. And in this process and from the edge, I can better notice patterns and shared affinities. I find shared metaphors and strategies and models for creating spaces for creative production beyond extraction. And in balancing this multiplicity of contexts as an editor, I can avoid any kind of universalism and standards of expression. My first question goes to writer and curator Sarabiri Moses. How do you find that art critics and curators can best push back against the tyranny of content sharing, its buried frames of discovery and cultural tourism? I'm referring to your section introduction in the book where you render this very beautiful argument about the distinction between art on one hand and content on the other. You describe how content delivery through global data infrastructures often flattens rich context into uniform territories.
One of the central issues that inspired my argument is to do with mistranslation in data sharing processes. Arts organizations and artists share data with international donors, curators, and scholars in order to gain a specific kind of visibility. As an artist in Kampala once said, if you don't have a website, you are invisible. Jordi, what are some of the insights that the authors you edited provide about cultural policy?
Thanks for this question, Sarabiri. I think that the reflections presented in the book raise several elements of interest for cultural policies. Firstly, the ability of art to provide space for communities to imagine alternative ways of relating to their societies and their environments is very present. I can relate this to the need for cultural policies to be concerned with the right to take part in cultural life and to adopt measures to address inequalities in participation. Secondly, several authors highlight that the organizations that promoted the force of art were quite flexible in terms of the expected results and allowed the funded projects to develop in the long term. And I think that this suggests that other funding models should also be more flexible and allow projects to evolve over time. And the last point that I would like to make is connected to how the stories presented in the book emphasize that cultural projects can be meaningful to improve people's lives. And I think that this should lead, in my view, to connecting culture more strongly with other policy areas, such as education or social inclusion. Viri, let me ask you next. Bearing in mind the diversity of perspectives and contexts that we each focused on in our sections, what common aspects guided you in the process of editing? How did you balance the personality of authors and the grouping of different articles and a relatively common theme?
To your first question, Jordi, I try to think about the guidelines provided by HIVOS, Prince Claus Fund, and European Cultural Foundation, and the varying cases as a central thematic of the book in its entirety. That is, as a thematic of cases in arts infrastructure and organizations in varying contexts and locations, and a parallel look at their operations. Nora, what are some of the insights that the authors you edited provide about technology? Did you get a sense of how technology functions within arts infrastructure globally?
I found that artists and arts organizations are using the internet and technology and critiquing it as well within their histories and their contexts. And they're deploying some of the early utopian impulses of technology in a different way, whether that's connectivity or creating a robust archiving method, or trying to resist hegemonic narratives by using the affordances of data and the naming of their own archives. So based on the newness of the technology and the social context, artists and cultural producers are finding their own ways globally to either double narratives, be opaque, deploy official narratives digitally while signaling to the people they need to get to make community. So as we find with any technology, whether it's tools or infrastructure and networks, it's the ideology underneath tech that remains the same across contexts. And so you're finding critique and resistance of these infrastructures depending on the cultural context and region. I'd like to ask you next, Karen, as editor-in-chief, you had a unique vantage point on the entire scope across the book's projects, on its polyphony, as you write in your introduction, outlining the propositions of this volume. How did you find yourself navigating the specific constellation of intersecting voices gathered in this book? Did you find yourself creating new editorial or conceptual strategies for navigating the volume's polyphony?
Thank you for this question, Nora. It's actually the design of the book that captures this sense of polyphony. It offers a beautiful space of simultaneity and equivalence that the contributions inhabit, each being a local specific voice on the one hand and contributing to the chorus on the other. For each project, the book design offers two identifiers, the precise geographic coordinates of its location, as well as a photograph of the open sky above it. The geographic location is unique. The look into the sky is a projection, an opening, and shared by many others. On the editorial level, this translated into precise directions for the research teams. Each was asked to position themselves and explicitly reflect on their own perspectives and approach. Secondly, it was important to me that each project was also invited to represent itself in their own words and images. Thirdly, knowing that we operate in different cultural contexts, we also insisted that references are explained so that we don't get mired in discourse that is accessible only to some, usually trained in Western scholarship. In matching editor with essays and in grouping essays within each section of the book, I tried to similarly acknowledge the individual subjective voice. Rather than bundle the essays along the usual criteria, such as chronology, location, or format, we created groups looking at each editor's expertise. It seemed most exciting and legitimate to consider the inquiry that drives your own research, Nora, and similarly to group the projects by their aspiration. What are they working towards? What are we working towards? What do we hope to learn? Let me turn this back to Jordi. Given your expertise as a scholar, but also as an advisor to governmental cultural agencies, in this trajectory contained in the book, from creative maker to critical reflection to eventually tool for social and political change, what was the most salient step for you to ensure that these contributions coalesce in a cohesive book, and why?
Thank you, Karen. I believe one of the most interesting aspects in the book is the ability to bring together very different disciplines, as well as authors with very different areas of interest. Overall, this results in a very polyhedral book in which local stories and their meanings are explored from multiple sides. I think that as editors, we had to ensure that this richness of perspectives came to the surface, respecting and reinforcing its diversity. There is, of course, an exercise in ensuring that language, arguments, and the complexity of territorial realities can be accessible to different readers. But overall, I don't think that this was particularly difficult in this case. The role of editing is, of course, also very subjective to a certain extent. And I think that this is reflected in the introductions to each of the sections of the book. Just as with authors and their chapters, we were keen to recognize the particular positions of our analysis and where we came from. In my case, I tried to interpret some of the views presented by authors with regard to how art opens perspectives on society and on ways of living together, and what this implies in terms of cultural policy.
As you can tell, this has been an extraordinary journey. I'm grateful to the many collaborators of this publication, and here I would like to especially thank my spectacular colleagues in the editorial team, Jordi Balta Portales, Nora Khan, and Zerubiri Moses. Join us and buy the book, and I think you'll enjoy it and learn from it as much as I have. Thank you very much for coming and joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for coming and listening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Yes, thank you, editors. What a fascinating process in the making of this book. Here it is once again, Forces of Art, Perspectives from a Changing World. Let's have a quick look at our live illustrator, Mena. Mena, how are you doing so far?
Good. Very stimulated. I heard so much interesting stuff, and that's why it's a very full drawing.
So I was wondering, how do you select what to put in your illustration, and what do you just leave out?
I leave out what I don't understand at all.
That's very
and what
smart.
I put in, what I put in is a very intuitive process. I can kind of tell when something is salient, I think. Also, things that I myself find important, I guess.
So it's just based on your own taste, and like you said, on the parts that grip you personally, right? Yes,
I think so. Yeah.
I'm glad to see I'm included in the drawing once again. That means I did catch your attention. That's great. Yes, that does look like me. I immediately I noticed that face. That's the face I pull when, we have kind of technical problems and they are being solved in the background. I'm glad we're doing fine so far. So Mena, you have 15 minutes to finish the drawing. Then I will be back to see the end result. Okay, so good luck with that. That was Mena Marleen. Yes, thank you, Mena. Next, our final stop on our virtual tour around the world, where we look in on art projects and cultural organizations. And we arrive at 32 degrees east, near to Kampala, the capital city of Uganda. And let me tell you something, there's a lot going on there. Just have a look.
We recently just moved. So I am speaking to you from our temporary space in Kamalagala, which is sort of on the south side of the city. What's super special about this place is that it is our very own. So we used to rent, but we actually have purchased this plot. So over the next few years, we will be building the very first purpose-built, purposely designed space for artists in the city. And that will include, of course, our library and resource center, which is at the heart of so much of what we do. So we have our library and resource center, and then we also have studio space that we use and provide to artists. A major program that we host is Kla Arts. So Kla is short for Kampala, which is our city, and it's really, again, about bringing art into the streets. We live in a very vibrant cultural city, but you really don't get to see visual arts much when you're moving around. So just again, thinking about how to make art more accessible, the value and strength of public art to, showcase different ways of thinking and reflecting and imagining and connecting communities in different ways. We do that through our library, which I'm currently in right now. So this has a collection of many different contemporary art publications, catalogs. We have poetry, we have books on film, And it's really one of the only libraries of its kind in the city. And so for any artist who wants to research more and explore and have their own self-directed learning, it's a really tremendous asset that we are able to offer. We had a really great experience working with the Forces of Art researcher. We worked with Kobe Graham, who came to us from Accra. And it was really great because we've had different interviews with different researchers over the years, and sometimes they're coming from a very distinctly academic background. And Kobe had that, but he also operates as a creative and artist in his own right. He's very involved in the art scene in Accra. He DJs on occasion and hosts different events. And also his wife is Ugandan as well, so he had familiarity with the context. Also the fact that our library is open to anyone means that on a given day, because he spent a lot of time, I think he spent about a week just sitting in the library and talking to different people. He met, a poet and zine maker, he met filmmakers, he met a public health professional who is also a musician and an athlete. So he really got this perspective from just sitting in the space and not even just from interviewing us. But I think what was great with Kobe is that, he was analyzing us, sort of seeing it as, what is different about this organization as an outsider's perspective, who's still kind of inside by being a creative professional. I'm really sad that I don't have a physical copy of the book in my hands. I know probably a lot of people feel that way with COVID-19 and everything. But I think, just getting to see the PDF and looking through it and seeing so many familiar names and organizations and centers and collectives that are sort of our family in a way, that are all over the world, was just really special, I think, especially given these times. So for me, it was a really amazing experience to get to read that. And I know also, because it's so rich, I will be returning to the publication over the next few years to just continue to learn from different peers. And I think it's also great that it sort of provides a snapshot of a moment in time for a lot of these different spaces and contexts. And it's perfect for our library. I mean, it's really, our library is a way of, getting to see the wider world with never having to leave this container.
Excellent work going on there at 32 degrees east in Kampala in Uganda. And I'm sure that paper copy of the book Forces of Art is making its way to your library. It's just a matter of time. Don't worry, it will come to you. So by now, I'm sure you're all really impatient to know how the session with Pierre-Christophe Gam ends. I know I am. So let's switch back to Kenya now, where he is temporarily, and he's ready to take us through the last shifts of the acceleration of our imagination. Pierre-Christophe.
So, the secret to reality is that everything is just a dream. And it is only when dreams are seeded onto the infinite soul of our imagination that it can manifest into our world. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. I personally see art as a tool to help expand the scope of our imagination, of what is possible, and a tool to help us pause in order to consider and better appreciate all that is God. Art not as a destination, but as a way towards the self. To conclude, I will leave you with the final quote from the movie Sucker Punch. And finally, this question: the mystery of whose story it will be, of who draws the curtain. Who is it that chooses our steps in the dance? Who drives us mad, lashes us with whips, and crowns us with victory when we survive the impossible? Who is it that does all these things? Who honors those we love with the very life we live? Who sends monsters to kill us and at the same time sings that we will never die? Who teaches us what's real and how to laugh at lies? Who decides why we live and what we'll die to defend? Who chains us? Who holds the key that can set us free? It's you. You have all the weapons you need. Now, fight. That's it.
I was expecting a little more, but thank you so much. Thank you so very much, Pierre-Christophe in Kenya. And let me tell you something. You made it to the drawing that's being made by our Mina Marlene. So I'm sure you are excited to know that. I'm just telling you. So Mina, she got your hair right. That's for sure. Thank you. Thank you once again. Pierre-Christophe Gam in Kenya at this moment. And talking about Mina, let's go see the end result of her illustration. Yes, Mina, what did you add in the past couple of minutes?
I added what Pierre-Christophe said. I thought it was super beautiful and poetic what he said, that who is it that chooses our steps in the dance. Also, there's the spiral here that I'm still going to put the quote in. I was too late, but I took a screen cap, so it's going to be fine.
Repeat that question that Pierre-Christophe asked us.
Who is it that chooses our steps in the dance?
And what would be your answer to that? I have no idea myself, but what would you answer?
I don't know, but I think it's a very evocative question, and there's a few questions in that I put in the drawing without an answer, which I think will make the drawing even nicer to look back on. You know?
Because everybody can fill in their own idea of what the answer would be. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what especially inspired you of today's this afternoon, the book launch itself? Is there anything that sticks to your mind?
Let me think. I liked everything that people said about art as a space. And I think that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so in my drawing, I think I just put many different quotes about that in the drawing.
Yes. And could you maybe, I know I'm springing this on you, Mina, but could you tell me what art means to you?
Ooh, what art means to me? I think at its best, it's life affirming for me. When I see that something has beauty or meaning for someone, and they can kind of pull you into that, it can be so comforting, and it can be so I don't know. I think a lot of it can also be a confirmation of your own identity, right? Especially if there's not a lot of place for that elsewhere in the world.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and I guess I feel the same way too. So thank you so very much, Mina. I really love the process that you go through, and I really appreciate that you share it with us, because it must be kind of daunting to just sit there and know that you have to deliver within that certain time frame, but you do it every time, and I'm so very impressed with that. So thank you for that.
Thank
and
you.
I know I will be seeing you again for the very last workshop, which is in 2 weeks. But we'll get there when we get there. And in the meantime, I'd like to tell everybody watching that your illustrations will make their way to all the people watching, so that it's a tangible reminder of all these sessions that we are sharing with each other. Thanks again, Mina, and good luck.
Thanks.
Yes,
it's been
bye-bye.
a pleasure.
It has been.
Thanks.
Thanks. So that was Mina Marlene, and that actually gets us to the end of this program. And for the roundup, I'd like a couple of comments from people who are absolutely, totally involved in the event and in the book. Let me introduce to you one by one. Mechthild van den Homberg. She is with Next Generation of the Next Generation program of the Prince Claus Fund. And Ilaria Mancini, who is the research coordinator of Forces of Art. So let me start with you, Mechthild. This has been a whole process. I've mentioned it a couple of times. At least 2 years, the book was in the making, and then this event, and then the workshops and all of that. How do you look back on the whole process so far? Because we're not finished yet, but how do you look back so far? Unmute your mic, please.
Sorry.
Yes, Mechthild. Start again,
Yeah.
please. Mhm.
Sorry. Thank you, Aldit. Yeah, it was a journey. It's quite a journey. I will look back very, very briefly, because when Prins Clausen started this initiative in 2018, together with our partners in crime, HIVOS and the European Culture Foundation, we could never have hoped that 2.5 years later, this project would come to an end, right? With this great book and yeah, with such a vibrant, exciting and diverse network of contributors. You saw them passing by during the workshops and this launch. And despite the fact of the complexity of the art world, as Heba phrased it, and despite COVID, and despite all the difficulties researchers had to overcome, you know, I think art itself brought us through it. And yeah, of course, I phrase what I heard, and I think that is mainly what it is. And I really want to thank you all for that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mechthild, for your work, because that was a lot of work that you coordinated behind the scenes, and you actually made a lot of it happen. So thank you, Mechthild van der Homburg. And Ilaria, I have a question for you, because now that the book is here, I wonder what's the next chapter. And I don't mean of the book, but I mean on the agenda. How do you carry on from here?
Yeah, thank you for this question, Aldit. Yeah, I like to think that we're sort of coming maybe to the end of this event of the book launch, but I hope certainly not to the conclusion of the journey of the book. I rather hope that its journey is just sort of beginning, and that this can only happen if people take the time to read the book, to be inspired maybe, or maybe not. Because one of the things that I think we can take stock of from this research, one of the things we have learned from it, is that there really is no one-fits-all answers, and that it is really only through multiple perspectives, through many voices, many points of view, that we can hope to sort of grasp the forces of art. And I hope we can think of it as a sort of commons, so something that is shared by many actors, but actors who are diverse and different one from the other. And so I think we can just only invite you who are watching this event to become one of these actors, and to sort of join us in a debate that we think is very timely. I think is very timely on what is the role of art in our world.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Ilaria. And once again, thank you, Mechthild, as well, for making all of this happen. And this brings us to the end of this event. I'd like, on behalf of the organization, to thank all the speakers and all the panelists, the artist Pierre-Christophe Gam in Kenya, of course, live illustrator Mena Marleen, our friends in Indonesia, Cameroon, and Uganda for sharing their work with us. This wonderful location where we are today, Framer Framed in Amsterdam. The organizing team of the event, of course, the technical crew, they are the people at socialstreaming.nl. You, the audience, thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments and questions. I'd like to add myself very humbly, thank me, and most of all, the researchers, the authors, the editors, and the publishers who have made the book what it is. It's a book that will hopefully make a deep imprint in societies worldwide, opening the path to new perspectives and inclusion, all thanks to the forces of art. Good luck with what comes next, and goodbye.